So the other day, I had just like the ultimate day. I've caught a lot of big bags in my life, and you guys, I talk to a lot of you guys like on the phone, via messaging, and that. Like, you guys are my boys. So I wanted to share this, but then I also wanted to share. I kind of figured a little something out. Like, I'm a little old school, right? I can do the forward facing thing, but the old flukey dookie. So I figured out like a little sneaky trick with an OG fluke that I'm going to show you guys. That's pretty darn cool. But let me get back to it. So I got to tell somebody about it. I had an ultimate day. I've caught a lot of big bags in my life, a lot of 40-pound bags. Had 49 once, had 45, 46, 44, 43, like some big bags. And I came out to Guntersville, dude, and in my opinion, I caught the ultimate bag. So we had 24 and a half. And when I say we, I mean I. Um, and the best part about it was the very first fish that I caught was like an almost 6.5 flipping mats. Like my juice. I absolutely love that. So doom, 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 and dude took me for a ride. Like I couldn't even get her out. I had to like do that point and pull kind of thing because she was so balled up. That is a grown, beautiful bass right there. The way I love to catch them. Flipping 1.5 with a little BB cricket in the thick stuff, hydrilla, junk mats, and then the day kind of panned out absolutely insane. So I started idling around. It got super duper hot. The flipping bite kind of slowed down. I caught another few like 3-pounders, and I caught one 4-pounder in there. But I ended up going kind of offshore, and that's what's going to get into what we're going to talk about with this fluke, which is probably one of the most versatile and fish catching lures aside from a soft plastic worm. But I got offshore, caught another almost 6-pound largemouth using a hover rig, and that's what we're going to talk about in relation to the fluke. Kind of different baits and how they behave on a hover rig. A lot of guys are throwing way too small of stuff, especially in summer. But back to the story, right? So then I catch a 3.5-pound spot. So I had a 24.5-pound bag with a punching fish, some hover rig fish on super light line, and a 3.5-pound spot. So in my eyes, like the perfect mix bag, the perfect mix technique bag. It was absolutely epic. But what I wanted to show you, a lot of guys are throwing a hover rig now, but I don't think everyone's doing it the same. And especially during summer, I'm doing it a little bit differently, I think. I'm still fishing kind of offshore, trying to draw these fish up, but it's replaced that ball head jig and minnow for me, especially this kind of like later summer period. And last year I absolutely messed them up using this is this little Gambler hover hook. There's a lot of different ones out there, but this is a 3/32 Gambler hover hook. And then what I was doing that was a little bit different is I would take just a fluke. This is the Gambler fluke. It's the super stud. And the only reason I was using a Gambler fluke is because the plastisol that's used in here is a little bit softer than your standard like Zoom super fluke. And I was rigging it up on that hover hook, and it's a much bigger presentation than guys usually use on that hover hook, and I was messing them up, dude. It casted better. One of the biggest problems with throwing like a little presentation like this is it's hard to cast. Even I got a lunker stick, mountain bass, medium light. Even with that lighter rod and 12-pound braid to 8-pound fluorocarbon, it's a little hard to cast. So putting something a little meatier like that fluke on there really allows you, how you can throw like a weightless fluke? Well, add like a 16th or an 1/8 ounce to it. You can really bomb that thing and be super accurate, especially if you're using forward facing like my active target with it. But I've been using it this year, and I've still caught some fish on it, but it's definitely not as strong a player, I guess you could say. So I've played around with a couple variations on this presentation, and this is what I'm kind of excited to show you. So there's two real go-tos when I cannot get them to close the deal on that super stud that I've been messing around with, and it's the same baits that I caught those fish on when I caught that 24.5 pounds. I caught one of the big ones on a fluke, and then I'm like, you know what? Some of these fish are roaming around. This is a great opportunity to experiment with some different baits. So the first one, and this isn't the super sneaky one, but this is the kind of sneaky one. This is a Kitech Shad Impact. Once again, it's a very Fluke style bait. This guy comes in at 4 inches. It's a little smaller than your standard like super Fluke, like that super stud and a super Fluke. I think they're like 5.5 inches. It's more slender, and then it also has kind of that straight sort of dong like tail. And what I found with this thing is it's a little bit harder to cast, but what ends up happening is it's super soft and you get a little bit of rocking motion. But what's cool is I do this little like hair jig retrieve with a hover rig from time to time, a couple quick reels, or I'll pop it up. This thing really darts, and then it does this kind of like rolling back to the bottom that has kind of a cool sort of presentation to it. But in playing with this, I noticed this is a much thinner bait, you know, than your standard super Fluke, and that kind of keyed me in to something. So I've been playing around with some JDM stuff. As you guys know, you've probably been watching the videos. I got some Raid stuff, I got some Jackal stuff, got all kinds of stuff, probably too much stuff. But I went on Tackle Warehouse and I was looking for alternatives for Flukes, and I found these. These are Duel Realis. These are the Pintail, the Versa Pintail. This is the 5-inch, so basically a Fluke, right? But let me tell you, it behaves completely different. I just bought like 5 bags. The fish a little dirty, and I need it. So let me crack it open and show you what I'm talking about. So you're getting the length. It has a little lower, kind of like wider belly, so it's a little bit taller bait. It has that straight, you can see how super soft the plastic is too. It's super jiggly, right? So it's a much softer plastic than even that super stud, definitely softer than Zoom Super Fluke, and it has that Kitech kind of tail to it, that real straight pintail. I like that because when you're doing this, that little twitch is absolutely killer because you're not really imparting a lot of action on it when you're doing this hover rig thing. So here's the big key. This bait is much thinner, and it has sort of a concave sort of ribbing that goes down sort of the belly of the bait. What I found is, like I said, you're not really imparting much rod tip onto this hover rig when you're fishing it, but the Fluke, I noticed that it doesn't really rock. It sort of darts a little and does this kind of shimmy, which is fun. I've caught a bunch of fish, but a lot of times, especially with that jig head and minnow, things along those lines, you're really looking for that side-to-side rock. Well, I found it. So this thing on a hover rig, I don't know if it's because of the width of the body or the way the body is shaped, but basically with a very soft semi-slack shake, just that soft hover rig, because if you jerk it too hard, I'm using a 3/32 or a 1/16 ounce, it comes up too high, it jumps up too high in the water column. You're just trying to run it parallel over those fish, and I noticed this thing, it does the old shimmy. Dude, it rocks back and forth when you put a very soft kind of, it's a barely noticeable kind of pop in the rod tip, and pop is the wrong word. It's almost like a lift. It's just, you're just kind of shaking that slack line, and this bait is rocking back and forth with that hover hook in it, dude. It is absolutely killer. The other thing that I noticed is a lot of times when you're doing this hover hook presentation, when you stop the bait and let it fall back down, the fish tend to disengage, or that's what it seems like on the active target on the forward facing. They get disinterested. I don't know why, if it's unnatural or what, but what's cool with this thing is a lot like that cast baits presentation that I showed you guys, where you put the nail weight in the front and you actually reel it and it looks like a trap. When you stop this thing, it does a little side-to-side shimmy as it falls back down. It does end up kind of like going nose down and doing a little bit of a circle, but that initial stop on semi-taut line causes it to rock back. It's freaking sick, dude. Absolutely sick. The other thing that I noticed too is when I'm doing that shake and bait kind of deal, this one, the tail on it is very comparable to the Kitech. However, this one really has a swimming motion, and not even with the bait darting or anything. It just kind of wags, almost like a trailer, like when you put a spunk shad on the back of a chatterbait, how it does that wag, like the chatterbait almost imparts the action to it. It's almost like the hover hook and that semi-slack kind of like shaking just makes this tail, it's not even like twitching. It's just kind of swimming in the water. It's badass, dude. It's seriously badass. Now, with everything, there's a fault, right? The only downside to this, and the color that I'm using, this is light pearl blue. You guys know how much I love throwing a Kitech. It's basically kind of that pearl blue that you get in the Kitech, one of my favorite colors, super versatile, dirty water, clean water, whatever. Only downside, this is like a JDM, or it's a Japanese plastic. It's Duel Realis, you know, it's super soft. They tear up extremely easily, and they are pricey. I think it comes in at like $8.99 or $9.99. It's an expensive bag of Flukes when it comes down to it. You could probably do this pretty much with a Fluke, but really the differentiating kind of point is the action that I'm getting out of this thing, that side to side, the wagging of the tail, and then that hovering kind of wag fall. It's not happening with a Super Fluke or that Super Stud. You get a little different behavior, a little more twitchy kind of gliding behavior, whereas this thing is giving you that rocking and that shimmy. I absolutely messed them up on it though, dude, on this Light Pro Blue. I tore through a bunch. I had to order another like 7 packs for this derby that I'm fishing tomorrow here in Guntersville. But it's super killer. It casts really well too. There's a lot of salt content in the bait, so it really bombs out there. And it's just, dude, it catches them. I don't know what it is, but it's kind of funny how like an OG lure, you can kind of remodify it or look at it a little bit different and I don't know, play with the little like Japanese versions and get a completely different behavior of what you think is going to be the exact same lure. But dude, I messed them up on it. My setup was that 3/32, just that hover hook, just like that. And then I'd put that thing on there. The rigging is a little tricky. I'll show you guys how to do it real quick. What you're gonna do is you find kind of, get some slack out here. You find kind of a little back on the Fluke right there, probably something like right about there. And then you're basically kind of like skin hooking it just under like that, running it, and it's extremely important you keep it straight. There's a little vent in the bait right there. I stop right before that vent and bring it out, and then I kind of like jam that weight in there. I'll take my fingers on the hook and then my fingers on the eye and drop it in, and then you simply kind of pop the nose of the bait right over there. So you get just a center weighted Fluke, and I think that has a lot to do with why this presentation works so well with the Fluke. It really kind of like twitches differently, and it just has this really cool fall when you're fishing it. But that's the rig, running on an 8-pound fluorocarbon Sunline Sniper to 12-pound cast braid on a little Daiwa Exceller, 7-foot medium light monster bass lunker stick, you know, your standard finesse small swim bait rod. And I'm just either throwing it over the grass and kind of twitching it ever so slow, or I'm using that forward-facing sonar and trying to pick out either little groups of fish or like focusing on schools of fish and keeping that bait parallel, not letting it drop, and then keeping it above those fish. 100% the most important aspect of fishing this hover hook is keeping it above the fish. The other little bone that I'll throw you is those fish that I couldn't get to close, the ones that I could see on forward facing, every once in a while I'd use this little fast retrieve, almost like we talked about it, hair jigging a hover rig. I'd kind of get it in front of them, get them to group up on it, and I'd put 2 quick reels on it, and one of 2 things would happen. Mike would lose 100%, or one would dart up and be like, I want that, I'm gonna close the deal, I'm not letting it get away, and it would dive in and freaking eat that thing. It's an absolutely epic day, dude. Anytime you catch over like 20 pounds, I don't care what lake you're on, Okeechobee, Guntersville, any lake, dude, over 20 pounds, you're in a good place. We had 24.5, absolutely epic day, and we caught them doing the coolest things. The hover hook, punching, and freaking we had a spot next then, dude. You can't beat that. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys got any extra tips, or if you've played with any other kind of new school OG Flukes, definitely I want to hear about them. Drop them down in the comments box. I'll put links to all this stuff at Monster Bass Tackle Warehouse if you guys want to go check out this Duel Realis versus Pintail, or if you want to check out the Super Stud, the Kai. But we'll see you back out on the water. I'm going to go fish a derby tomorrow. We'll see how we do. Wish me luck. 10-4, boys. Later.